We are gonna, there we go, we got the recording, and we're gonna jump in.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're going to start.
Yes, you all are on.
Get us in the mood here. Just going to show something that maybe speaks to the moment and also to our relationship. So I'm going to share this video. Can you hear okay? Rosamond S. King.
All right, I'm going to read tonight from both of my books. So the book that most recently came out is All the Rage, and that's the image there. And just do this. And the second book that I'll be reading from is Rock, Salt, Stone. And when we are reading, you are muted, but in your own home, feel free to give a mm-hmm, or a snap, or a hand wave, or whatever response, because if we were in person, there would be hopefully some responses. The first poem in All the Rage. This book is for you, whether or not you survived. This book is for you, sleeping with the light on, so your eyes will open to brightness no matter the weather. This book is for you, whether you quarantine stuffing your face or reorganizing drawers, streaming or staring. This book is for you, the ignorant people who go Zoom bombing other people's events. This book is for you and the woman who told me the world does not need these poems. So the poems in All the Rage, most of them are a part of a series called Living in the Abattoir. And I was thinking about this theme of words across the water. And one thing that you can do as you're listening is replace the word blood with water and see what that does to the poems. Folks in the South, I think, might use the word abattoir a little more than other people. I don't know if you're familiar with the word abattoir, but I'm sure somebody will drop into the chat what it means. America the Beautiful. I am not safe and neither are you. Everything big and abundant. If it's more beautiful elsewhere, it's shinier here. Anything bad is better than the alternative. Say it with me. Ba, again in the privacy of your own muted zone. Ba. We live in the most gorgeous abattoir. From the French, but better here. Like French fries, which make us round and marbled. Our vegetables covered with cheese, our fruits glazed with glycerin into glossiness. Welcome to the abattoir. Elsewhere, the abattoir is hidden, the blood drained away. Here, whole neighborhoods are abattoirs. True, some never make it out, but while they're here, we distract them with baubled accessories and bubbled beverages. All of us are born in blood. But those born in the abattoir smell it every day, a reminder that our death is imminent and will be swift and bloody. Elsewhere, childhood is different, bloodied only by scrapes and falls. Elsewhere, people are free of the smell of iron in their own hair, sweat, clothes. They are free of the taste of it. If you're just walking through, you mightn't notice the ooze. But cartwheeling in the abattoir, our palms will be slick with blood, printed with it. And we realize our home is a zoo for the underprivileged, and people elsewhere, people will visit and pet us with one well-meaning hand while holding nosegays with the other. We realize at 5 or 7 or 9 that we were not meant to ever leave, that we live surrounded by blood and killing machines because we are meant to die young. Our 8 or 9-year-old selves watch elsewhere people wipe their feet on the way out. This poem is called Crimson Colored Glasses. And when I wrote it, I was not thinking about Meghan Markle, but now whenever I read it, I think about Meghan Markle. Palaces are always majestic, impressive, and gauche. Palaces leave impressions, gold slick with blood, fountains pulsing with it, jewels with smears diminishing their clarity. Hold on to the railing. You might slip. I want to take a moment and Gabrielle, well, you don't know, but Gabrielle and I have been friends for a very long time. And that friendship has also grown into collaborations. And we often talk through our projects with each other. So that's some of what we might talk about when we share when we have our discussion and so on. But I want to share a couple of images with you of recent performances. So again, thinking about words across the water, this is a performance that I did recently in New York's newest park. A pier was turned into a park called Little Island. And I was commissioned to write a new poem and give these, what they call poet tours of the island. And so this is an image of me giving the tour. I had a dress made, and the skirt is actually made out of Tyvek. So people can write on the skirt. And I'm just going to show you maybe a couple other images. This is an image of someone actually writing on the skirt. And let's see, this is an image of the skirt with the writing. So, and then I wanted to show one other. The technology. Let's see, yeah, we'll go here, share. And this, there were 2 performances that I did that actually were connected to performances that Gabrielle did. So this is one of them. And again, thinking about the theme words across water, this performance is called Crossings, and it was performed in Accra, Ghana. It was in memory of one of my mentors, Jane Cortez, and my grandmother, Sonetta Elvina King, who had both died within the past year. And so I dressed in white, and it was a processional performance. I danced from closer to the center of town all the way out to the ocean. So you can see this is as we're getting towards the ocean. And one of the interesting things about this performance is one of the people who was tagging along to the performance, who herself is a writer, she's from, as many people were, from Ghana, but she stopped periodically to ask people what they thought was going on. And some people said they thought I was an evangelist. And some people said they thought I was crazy. And a couple of people said they thought that I was a spirit. That's a close-up of Crossings from Accra. And this is another performance that was at the Hemispherical Biennale in Montreal. It's called Sable International. And in this, I was dressed in a nurse's uniform with the color red. And again, it was a processional performance. I started at a location that that signified the indigenous people in Montreal supposedly giving the land to the colonizers. And I moved through what I kept having a weird sensation when I was trying to figure out what route I was going through. And then somebody told me that one of the places that I kept returning to used to be a site where enslaved people were auctioned. It's like, that's why. And so I processed through there. The photo that you can see me from the back, I'm in front of a World Trade Center location, so a very commercial location. And here I performed the movements of the Nago dance, which is a Haitian warrior dance. And so, and you see the bags around me are filled with sand. And so as I would dance, I would fling the sand. And so this was a performance piece that actually didn't involve words, but it used the language of dance. And I was thinking about all of the Caribbean women who have traveled to North America to be caretakers for people in the global North. So that's just a couple of images. Let me stop share. And for me, and Gabrielle can talk about if this is true for her as well, the work that I do that's visual art, the work that I do that's poetry, the work that I do that is performance art is all part of the same project. So I'll read two more poems from All the Rage. Desire stronger than fear, more pulsing than threat. Desire make ya liquid flame, taller than and hotter. Desire lead you by the nose hairs, promising love and panic. Just there, just beyond. Desire will drown you. And as liquid becomes pummeling wave flame, still there, pulsating, crimson, sunrise, citrus, dancing, hot and hard, lovely and terrifying. Sometimes it is that simple to survive. This blood-drenched, crawling, wailing life is not possible, and neither is blinking through scars into a beaming sun without forgetting. Start with simple. Living is not possible without life. So I'm gonna read a few poems from All the Rage. Sorry, from Rock, Salt, Stone. And again, thinking about, and I'll repeat this throughout, thinking about words on water and thinking about a line that is in the poem that I wrote for Little Island. What if we traced our lineage through land and water instead of blood? What if we traced our lineage through land and water? This is for Isatu, for Hattie, for Adama, and for Elle. Someone came looking for your kind, and you looked at her, considered how much she is not from here. Asia all over her face and hair, her English worse than yours. And you opened your mouth, whispering in your own compound, afraid still. But fear is as common as your own hair. You wash it and comb it and plait it in rows. I am looking for you. I am looking for our kind. Will you open your mouth to me? We can scratch and oil each other's scalp. If we only open our mouths, if we plait and unplait each other's heads, we don't even have to speak. It may never happen. You and I are dangerous to each other. One whisper causes bushfire here. You and I may even be cousins. If we never meet, if we never get to whisper together, it is enough that you opened your mouth. It is enough knowing that you exist. My other, in the long hours of doing and undoing your hair, listen to the whispers. You will know it is me. You will recognize your own silent scream. There is no more reason to bring water to your face, the daughter said. The sea is there, and during the rainy season, you cannot ask for more water or salt. The mother said, how do you know? The daughter, smiling, you fed me with your blood. I know. The next 3 short poems are part of a sub-series that's called the Shadow Poems. And if we have any writers who are in the room, if you want, I can share with you the prompt that I use. It's my favorite prompt, writing shadow poems. This is the poem Wet. My hair on your cheek, then my hair on your belly. And still you want more. You, yes, where there is no rest, we rest. The blood never stops. You, yes, there is no outside. Feel this here. The poem stretched out. Body, sigh, body, shh. Follicles and epithelial cells, gastronomy and desire. Body, mind. Without or in the absence of rest or repose. On the divan, I always wanted. With the woman I've always wanted. Body, mine. Body, blood, white and red, blood, acid, fluid, wetness, mine. Me in the absence of, without, external, alone, still, touch, feel, skin, and under that. The poem Reaching. You know me, know us, yes, we, then who, with you, not me, in the absence of me, you already cook, but the food, nah. In the absence of us, me, the rain off, be tough. Rethink. Who are you to say absolutely? If, no, yes, I alone, craving belly, food, rock stone, ground, yours truly, rain giving blood. What if we traced our lineage through land and water? Go home, water poet, into traveling machines, your feet into movement, wetness. You will always sink in tar and blood. Go home, poet, to water. I'm actually going to end with what is the first poem in Rock, Salt, Stone, which is called Bring Back. My Eshu lies over the ocean. My ocean lies inside the sea. A bhikkhu cries down by the river. Don't bring back that body to me. Bring back. The Duen is derived from a bhikkhu, and Oshun became Urzali. My history lies under the overt, my heritage beyond the scene. My brawn, it belongs to the Ogun. My blood, it flows into the sea. The two meet inside a black body and whisper, you fight to be free. Free. Back. The ancestors reached out to name me. There's Aku and Trini in me. They both can be traced to the same source of blood and of soil and sea. My Nyamo came over the ocean. My Oshun lies inside of me. With Eshu there, why I'm still living. This story flows into the sea. Thank you so much. All right, Gabrielle Civil.
Je suis là. Here I am. Wow, it's so wonderful to hear your beautiful voice bring us back into this moment, into our purpose of being here, words across the water. It's interesting that you talked about land and water and not land and blood. I still think about land and the earth quaking, and especially in the recent events of the earthquake in Haiti. I'm thinking as well of past Haitian earthquakes and past meditations on heritage and diaspora loss, which is a major theme as well of my work. So I'm going to show another video, teeny tiny video that can help us give a sense of that. Here, let me make sure you can hear the sound. I'm going to go back and optimize it. It's not a lot of sound. That's why it's important to give you a chance to really hear it. When I hear your words, bring back, it makes me think of the spilling, and then also the attempt to kind of return. And bring that all back. I'm curious, before I sort of continue and build on the incredible energy that Dr. Rosamond S. King has brought, I'm curious if people just could drop into the chat when they think of their heritage, when they think of their source, when they think of their resource, what do you want to bring back? So just type in the chat. What do you want to bring back from your heritage, from your original landscape, from your people, from your history, from your ancestry, from your secrets, from your questions? What is it that you want to bring back? What words might you want to come to you across the waters? What new language might you be able to articulate, even through this very flat and strange medium of Zoom, about identity, your own identity, individually and communally? I love it when we can come together and basically crowdsource a poem. So here's what we have. What do you want to bring back? Conversations with my grandmother's home, wherever it is, the opportunity to meet my grandfathers, bring back eating with our hands from a single dish, stories, songs, connections to spirit and transformative energy, the chance to resolve some stuff with my father, outrageous women, deep rivers, my grandmother's wisdom, the loving, caring relationship to food, old, soft, rounded mountains, stories from ancestors, more conversations with Aunt Sissy, closer connections to people and the land, less distractions and distance. Beautiful. Thank you all so much for sharing. It's amazing that Rosamond and I have been friends for such a long time. I'm so thankful. The empathy of my mother, yes, bring it back. It's amazing because a lot of the things that Rosamond read, you'll hear some resonances, and we didn't tell each other what it was we were going to read. So that's going to be kind of exciting as well. I don't know. I think I still see that my homie is here, another person from Detroit. When I think about sort of my own relationship to language and identity, I have to recognize these really powerful sources and resources who are my parents and who came miraculously from 2 different countries and met in what I like to call the kingdom of Detroit. And so I'm going to read a little bit from my latest book, Ghost Gestures, Performance Writing. And this is a piece called Detroit, Black Parties and Spirit. There has to be food and drinks and music, and you need to be able to wear your shoes inside because sometimes your shoes are the best part of your outfit. Teetering high heels or hard black boots or sneakers straight out of the box, a party makes your shoes dancing shoes, and the height of a party is dancing. Kick back, kick up your heels, make merry, make light, take flight, flow. Celebrate and savor, simmer into crescendo. A volume of voices loud or low. It's all good as long as you hear a hum of pleasure, a crackle of satisfaction. This comes to me by blood. Haitian children dressed in the frilliest dresses, yellow and pink and sky blue, or in tiny suits with jackets and ties, accompanying their immigrant parents to a fete. Or on the other side at a barbecue with chicken and beer, listening to soul. Down in the basement, my parents in the 60s in Detroit, mingling these 2 strains with family and friends. One group just off the boat and the other not too far from the cotton field. The way they moved with Caribbean flavor, Southern warmth and Motown soul. There had to be some Africa in there too, right? They could dance all night until 6 in the morning, the children secretly jumping on the bed upstairs until they fell asleep in heaps. People swallowed fire at those parties, walked on glass. My mother and godmother in their new slick falls, my father, my godfather, my uncle, all clean shaven, looking sharp as a tack. My cousin Ghislaine dancing hard to Guantanamera. Bonita Guantanamera in the center of the floor. Boule de Fay in another spot doing the same. I saw Boule at a Haitian New Year's function a few years ago with gray hair and a walker. He was still throwing down. And those nights at those parties, Women did the spirit dance, ran forward and thrust out their chests, and then ran back, a dance Black women have been doing for centuries. Wiggling, twisting, grinding, holding on to their men, holding on to each other, letting go, catching up, getting free, getting up, getting down, doing their best to get to glory. Whining, you're right. I didn't put it in there, but you're right. Ha! Thank you for bringing it in there. I see Trini is here. Okay, a party is a conjuring of magical space, an invitation, an offering, a remembering, flushed and pulsing together. They silently cajoled, bring this here, bring this back, keep this here, bring us back, bring us here, bring us back to this. So we both were interested in bringing it back. I too am going to just show some performance images to help contextualize a little bit of what I do. I definitely agree with Rosamond that I write, I teach, I make art, installations, especially performances, and they all are a piece of the same project, the same work. Do you all hear these children, or is it okay? See, look, that's another kind of Zoom bombing. Okay, let me see if I can try to move us to another place. This is Zoom life now. Look at this. Let's see. Is this a little better, at least in terms of sound? You can't see me as well.
You're okay.
Oh, no.
The children are not bothering me.
They're okay?
Yeah, they're fine.
Well, you don't live next to them, but okay. That's wrong, because you know what? We were all children. I was a child. Can you see the screen okay? Can you see the images, words across the water? Thumbs up, great. So as I mentioned, and I showed in that video with the dirt, the earthquake of 2010 in Haiti was a very catastrophic event. And I think for a lot of Haitians, this most recent earthquake is bringing that back, and of course, adding additional trauma and pain. For me, back in 2010, that earthquake really reminded me of what it is to feel a diaspora loss and to not feel as if you have a right to that loss either. So both to feel great grief and also to feel a kind of guilt or a kind of inauthenticity, or the sense of, am I allowed to, am I supposed to claim this when it didn't happen directly to me, but it happened to people who I think of as my people, who are my people by bloodline, but I wasn't there. And so I made a trio of works, a trilogy, exploring those questions. And the trilogy overall is called Fugue. And the first Fugue, which is really commemorating the earthquake a year later, or almost a year later. Yeah, I guess it was December 2011. Used 4 suitcases, a shovel, and then these mounds of dirt. And there was a lot of playing with kind of, what does it mean to bury and unbury? And what does it mean actually to be with this earth, with this dirt, with this land, this earth that has quaked, this land that has split open? What is it like to have a body that's in relationship to those things? As Rosamond said, we have made numbers of performances together, or had opportunities for one performance of ours, like one of mine or one of hers, to flow into one of mine. And so you see, this is Rosamond Crossings, and she actually led the processional of people to me. And so I didn't know necessarily that she would show her images, but here we are, we're showing them. So you see, immediately in Accra, Ghana, then there's this turn to me, where I replace now, instead of having a shovel, I have a mirror. And instead of suitcases, I have these cash register rolls. And we're moving out now through this ritual of dissolution into the ocean. And when I think about words across the water, I have to also think about the words that were lost, the words that we don't hear, the words that are still kind of floating in the water. Dr. Martin, I'm making sure that I'm saying your name right. Martin, correct? The second? Okay. Mentioned that there's a piece that I've done for a long time. I haven't done it for a while, actually. I think the last time I did it was in well, first of all, we've had a worldwide global pandemic, as some of you know, so haven't been out doing much performance, sadly. I mean, it's been wonderful opportunities to experiment with Zoom performance, but this is a very embodied piece called Say My Name in Action for 270 Abducted Nigerian Girls. And, you know, actually, it was more than 270. I used that number because that was the number that was first reported in the New York Times. And I wanted to show this image because when we think about words across the water, there's so much about the representation of Black diaspora in these mainstream US media sources, and what is the language that we have access to try to understand what's happening? How does that inform our sense of ourselves as sort of an international or diaspora people or peoples? That's something that's interesting to me. Where can we find the sites or archives or documentation of our grief, of our traumas? And then what do we do? So again, the question of how do we negotiate or deal with loss that may or may not be ours specifically? Do you know, I mean, I am not one of these girls. And yet I felt such pain when I heard about them. And I felt like I wanted to do something both with that pain and also with that futility. And so I researched, and I mean, I first made the piece very shortly after it was reported that they were abducted, the Chibok schoolgirls. And so all of those names, all of their names weren't completely known, but the names that I could find, I put on one, you know, each sheet of paper that you see in the stack has the name of a girl. And for the girls that I didn't know, I just put a phrase, a girl who was snatched. A girl who was snatched, or a girl who got away, or a girl who was called. And so there were just these phrases, and I set a timer. And before the timer is set, I instruct the audience during the session, during the action, that they should do whatever they are moved to do. And when the timer goes off, I call those names. Just as it's like a teacher calling roll, because those girls were about to take an exam. And I just call a name, and then I let that piece of paper fall to the ground. And so that's the whole question. What is anyone going to do? And so this was maybe the second time I'd done the piece. And you see here that some of the people there refused to let those papers just fall, and they came. But I mean, they're different kinds of responses, and a lot of different things have happened. And I've done the piece, I don't know, 24 times in different cities. And so it's a pretty intense emotional experience, and also something that is fraught because I'm not Nigerian. I was not one of these girls. So what's happening in this space becomes interesting, and we can talk about that more. I want to show another few images just from another very early work that Rosamond and I also split a bill and had a performance experience. And this was a work in Puerto Rico called Anacaona. This was actually through the National Endowment of the Humanities seminar for Caribbean theater and cultural performance. So a lot of the people that you happen to see here in the audience were really interesting, kind of prominent cultural workers, theater makers, and scholars. So that was fun. And I don't know how many of you know about the history of what is now Haiti and the Dominican Republic, but there's a figure who's very popular in both of these sort of contemporary nations named Anacaona, who was an indigenous queen. And so my performance brings her back. So I guess that's sort of the theme of our reading here. I really stage the fall of the indigenous queen. And so I'm just going to read to you a little bit from that piece. And again, this is from Ghost Gestures. Anacaona. Who was Anacaona? Can we ever know? a Taino leader of what is now Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Anacaona, the golden flower, mutates, proliferates, vaporizes in the ether. Start a Google search and see Anacaona song, Anacaona boutique hotel in Anguilla, Anacaona Cheo Feliciano, Anaconda movie. See how the search engine turns her into a snake when she was the one who suffered treachery. Keening toward Caribbean performance, I turn to Haitian playwright Jean Mételus's 1986 play, Anacaona. Here, she is a beautiful doomed queen alarmed by the incursions of the Spanish and rightfully suspicious of them. When their emissaries approach her, she refuses again and again. Don't let crazy walk through the door, the Black ladies used to say. Don't let them soothe you with sweet words, lure you with false promises. It's a trap, it's a trap, it's a trap. Don't believe they can love you, see you, recognize your power. But Anacaona did. Why shouldn't she? She was haughty as a queen. Is it corny to believe in queens at the sight of your subjection? Consider corn and indigenous labor, popcorn and the cultural bomb, maize and raised identity. Consider chocolate and lard in Janine Antoni's Gnaw. Who gnaws and gets gnawed in Caribbean performance art? How do consumption and power forge diaspora identity? Anacaona tries to celebrate a future which was already her demise. To perform this would attempt to overthrow time, to reconfigure history once more. Anacaona's fatal flaw was not her vanity, but her abundant hospitality. She let crazy in the door. This rang a deep bell for me as an artist, as a Black woman, as a diaspora daughter. I would implicate everyone, the audience, and even myself. I would offer everything I had and then have it thrown back in my face. Somehow what happens? The shell and the fan, the cause and effect, the show and the scheme, the after party and the aftermath, the hubbub and hullabaloo, the shame and the rebuke, the chewed corn in my mouth, the now spit on the ground, the shoulda known better, the nobody cares, the loss and dereliction, the revocation and return, the shame on you, the shame on you, the shame on you, the impossible herstory, the trying to shine, the bloodlust, the I lost control, the body, memory, the holding back of tears, the new world now. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you so much. Do people need to like stretch or take a 1 second like water break? After years of this past year and a half of Zoom teaching, I learned like, sometimes you gotta remind people to move their bodies. Yeah.
Poetry is moving us so much, I don't think we need a break, but.
Yeah, cool. Maybe that was the break.
What's the break?
I think that was the break.
Had it, and now we'll move it.
Yes, now we'll move on.
Brilliant. Both of the performances were just extraordinary. There's more, I'm assuming, though.
Well, we wanted to have an opportunity for sure to talk a little bit more about the practice and to talk a little bit more about our work and to open up as well for questions from other people. Yeah. I
was also going to say that Dr. Cassidy has a young poet who's going to join us, I suppose, at the end, and I think he'll introduce Miss Berry later. Is Danielle, she's here? Yes, I think she came into the new room.
Ooh.
But while he's figuring that out, I was going to go back to the abattoir because I put in the chat that an abattoir is a slaughterhouse, And Vereen Parnell, who's on, like I said, for the International African American Museum, and I were talking to a young philosopher who talked about the slaughter bench of history, which was Hegel's idea. And as comparative literature people, I know you've heard this discussion. So would you talk a little bit about this tragedy of diasporic identity, which underlies so much, because the slaughter bench of history is the displacement of African peoples, which is a genesis of this creativity. So the ironic horror that's happening there is something that both of your works are exploring, the voyage through the town to, and then you find that side of enslavement, Dr. King, and then with Dr. Gabrielle Civil's work, the cash register receipts, everything being for sale, that idea, and all of this is connected to this horrible tragedy. Could you just talk a little bit more about your images, which is so intriguing?
There was so much in what you said. I'll just say a little bit about the abattoir. You know, that series, I started writing the poems in that series, and I didn't know it was a series at the time. Not when yet another Black person was killed by the police, but when yet another set of police officers were not indicted, right? When there was an official statement that there was no crime here, right? That the death of a violent death of a Black person by the state was not a crime. And I just started thinking about, well, I live in a Black community. And I think that this is a vibrant place, and there's got all different kinds of people. We've got Caribbean people, we've got Latine people, we've got African Americans, but other people seem to think something different about this community. And some people think that this is just a place for people to die. And so I wanted to explore that idea. And of course, you know, we keep getting bombarded with images of Black people's violent death. And so I was deep in that, and a lot of the book is about that. But then I also wanted to show that this place that some people call the abattoir is also a place of joy. It's a place where people hang out on the stoop, and it's a place where people have block parties, and it's a place where people fall in love. And so I wanted to show the breadth of that experience and not have it be kind of a sense of abjection. There's a poem in the book that plays with the phrase from Toni Morrison's Beloved, "Yonder they do not love your flesh," right? And that notion, and I just kind of deconstruct and reconstruct that phrase until it becomes love our flesh. We love yonder they do not, but we love our flesh. So that's kind of a little bit of the thinking beyond about the abattoir. And I'll return to the images, but Gabrielle, I'll let you say a little bit first, maybe.
Well, it's interesting. I was thinking as well about this idea of the slaughterhouse and the slaughterhouse bench of history, and the story of Anacaona, which there are different versions of it, but there's this idea that the Spanish governor Ovando was given the charge to come and like take things over, right? And so he tried to get a sort of like what would you say, an appointment to see the queen, and she would always say no. But then he said, well, we're going to have a party, and we're going to bring a party to celebrate you, at least in Métis Luce's description of this event. And when the men came, like with their swords and with all these things to massacre everyone, they claimed that they were just like their party rags, like this is how they partied, you know? And so they brought in all these things, and then they killed everyone there and they took over. So there are a number of things that are interesting to me about that. First of all, there's the slaughter, which connects to this question of like the slaughterhouse and the abattoir. But then there's some weird thing around like party or pleasure that's built into it, and the attempt to try to, from the other side, find another relationship to party or pleasure from the one that's been disrupted or broken through trauma and violence. So that's one thing I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about aftermath. And so sort of my images, at least when I think about the Fugue piece, that shovel, those suitcases. So this is the aftermath of the abattoir. This is the aftermath of the, what happens? How do you move forward? How do you rebuild a people, a spirit, a history after such traumatic intervention? So that's something I think that for me is really important. And that actually crops up even in these kinds of local stories, just like who gets to sit on the stoop and who catches the bullet, you know?
The thing that struck me is the betrayal. So the seduction and betrayal through this related to this concept of fatal hospitality that you brought up. But I see Dr. McCletchie also has a question. Allison?
I don't know so much about a question, but I was thinking through some of the discussion about diaspora, right? Because I guess when I started to think about this series in general, I mean, I'm coming from it from a really Trinidadian point of view as someone who completely embraces the carnival arts and all that the carnival arts has taught us and can teach us. And it seems as though we are continually rejecting that kind of what I would call native intelligence and trying to fit ourselves into these kind of Western modes of understanding, which, you know, yeah, we all have PhDs and we all go to universities and those things are important, but, you know, are we willing and able to recognize what we did cross the water with, right? What was retained? Are we willing to kind of hold on to that? And then Frank, you started this whole thing here about talking about the idea of diaspora, right? And what does that mean? And, you know, both Rosamond and Gabrielle, you know, I would consider you're like almost like double diasporic, right? Because, you know, you're here, you're American, but you clearly are grounded. At least what I hear in your work tonight, you're grounded in that sense of where you came from, right? Even though, you know, you may have, or your people may have been dropped off in the Caribbean or been in the South, there is that understanding of self that allows you to be proud of who you are, but still interested enough to learn more, right? As opposed to, well, I reach, I'm good, it's all, you know. You know, and for me, this is, there's a lot of kind of, and I think Frank and I have had these discussions, right? Psychic energy in terms of, because we teach at HBCUs and we teach at HBCUs because we believe in the legacy, right? But we also understand that they're problematic spaces and that our students come as adolescents come to any space, you know, in need of knowledge and an opportunity to grow. And so I was thinking all of that, and then you all know how much I love David Rudder. So I was thinking about his desperation, destination, right? Where I mean, I hated the song, but I love the song, right? Because it's all about that commodification that starts with the transatlantic slave movement, right? And he brings us all the way up to this kind of modern globalization, truly globalized world. And this morning on CBS, I saw this horrible report about how when we donate our clothes, how it ends back up in, I believe it was Kenya, creating these huge garbage piles that then fall into the sea. Right? So it's this, it's this weird connectedness
Mhm.
that is beautiful, but also can be so tragic. So I'm going to stop talking. But thank you, ladies.
Dr. Rosamond King just threw something into the chat about all colleges as problematic spaces and this characterization of the spirituality that you're celebrating as irrational. Could you just talk a little bit about that? Because your dancing, your reclamation of spirit, all that would be considered irrational in the academy. So,
Absolutely. And I think that building on what Professor McLetchie was saying, there is, you said something about what we bring with us, right? And there's what we bring with us consciously, and there's also what we bring with us unconsciously. So the first kind of, if you, on my website or, in my materials, the first work of performance art that appears is images of me in African clothing in a Jean Dubuffet installation in Paris. When that actually happened, I was in Paris, and I am very proud of my French. I speak fluent French. My father said French was the only African language you could learn in this country at the time that I was growing up. And so we all had to learn French. And so I am in these people's country and I can speak their language. And I was bombarded with a lot of racism, and more racism than the other Black people who were with me whose French was not as good. And I was having some challenges. And I needed to respond to the attack on my body, the racialized attack on my body, with an embodied response. And so I said to one of my friends, I need to just go into this, because the Jean Dubuffet, maybe I'll pull up the image if I can find it, but it's a black and white space. And I went in with this very bright African clothing. And at some point after I came back to the US, I was showing these images to a friend who's an artist. And she said, "Oh, you're making performance art." Right. And so, okay, that's a thing. Right. And so there are ways in which, if you're in the community and you're looking on the stoop or the porch or the gallery, whatever it's called, there's a way that people perform, right? And in some places we call it hanging out, acting out. And then in a different context, it becomes performance art. So I think that it's useful for us, as you're saying, Dr. Martin, to notice what is legible and how it is legible in different places and ways. And I think it was also Dr. McLetchie who dropped in the chat whining. There's some scholars younger than me who also do carnival studies. And I remember being at Caribbean Studies Association conference, and this younger scholar was talking about whining, and she started to whine. And I kind of clutched my pearls, right? Because I was concerned for this young woman, and would there be ramifications of her inappropriate behavior? Would she be able to get a job? Would men start to come on to her after, she didn't have any of that. This was part of her scholarly presentation. So even for me, as someone who, does things that can often be read as irrational, I had my own moment of kind of, recognition, misrecognition. And I just also want to say, in relationship to the Anacaona piece and some of the pieces that the thing about performance art as well is there is not the same kind of social construct or the social rules that there are around theater, right? Theater, we all know you're supposed to, for the most part, you're supposed to go in, sit down, you're not supposed to talk, you're not supposed to interact with the performers. But some of you will know the phrase, you can't play mass on afraid powder, right? If you're going to go out into carnival.
For sure.
Right? No matter how pretty your costume, you better be ready, because someone might throw mud on you, somebody might throw powder on you. And when you do performance art, it's the same thing. When you create a space in which people can interact with you, and Gabrielle might want to talk about what happened in Anacaona in particular. I actually have constructed some pieces in which I give people an option as to whether or not they want to do violence to me. Now, I am completely in control of the situation. I have all kinds of things set up for my own safety, but that's not visible. What's visible is that people have the opportunity to do violence against me as a Black woman in front of them. And people will take you up on the offer that you give them, right? People will do all kinds of things if you open up the space for it. And, you know, to me, that comments on them, and they are part of the piece, but it's not for everybody.
Does it happen more with men than with women? And the other question I have, just for the audience, in case there's students and they don't know who Jean Dubuffet is, Jean Dubuffet is a French artist who is a kind of post-Fauvist, post-Cubist artist who flirted with surrealism. So it's very important that you were doing this performance in a Jean Dubuffet space, because surrealism and cubism depend on these African origins. So it's interesting that you're being racially attacked in that context. To me, that's fascinating. I'm sorry,
I wanted to jump in for a second, because what Rosamond was talking about in terms of whining, right? So yes, for some of us who study carnival arts and carnival performance, this idea of, for female soca performers who whine as part of their performance, right? And for women who play carnival, right? The idea that you are allowed this space during this time to do this thing with your body that normally, you know, I went to convent, we don't do those things, right? I chip quietly in the corner, okay? I have images of my aunt who also went to convent, who opens the church door every morning for mass, right? Carnival time is her time, and she's on the street, and my poor deceased uncle was walking along the side, you know, with his water bottle and a towel for her. That was his job, right? But again, in that space, men know what their job is. And so if women are whining, whether it is on each other or by themselves or on top of 15 men, it's about her saying, this is my body. I can do with it what I want right now. And Ash Wednesday, I'm in church getting my ashes, and I'm back at my respectable job, and nobody's going to talk about me at all.
Yep.
Right? So that too, you know, is part of what I think sometimes we miss in our very Protestant evangelical world.
it's so healthy because it's a release. It's a social and cultural release. I think that is absolutely needed.
I want to go back, I mean, in terms of that release, to something that Rosamond said, even about watching the scholar bring, I think it was what you said, it was whining into the talk, right? And that goes back to your original question, actually, Dr. Martin, about the college or the academy or these sort of school spaces and what it means to bring that kind of energy. So I feel like Dr. Mafechi was talking about the difference between the sort of spirituality of the church and the convent and the kind of carnal spirituality of the body in carnival. I think what's interesting to me as a professor, and then also as a person who identifies as an intellectual, a thinker, to think about the kinds of intelligences that the body holds and that the body brings. And in your wonderful introduction for us, you talked about embodied gesture, and you can see even in the way that we both read. I mean, so this isn't even full performance from us, but just the way that we both read or the kinds of work that we do, it is really about generating knowledge, receiving knowledge, disseminating knowledge. And I think that what's exciting for me in, let's say, a classroom is to really work against the mind-body split and to try to both model and also offer opportunities and through assignments for students to do things that will actually compel them to deal with their bodies and how their bodies hold knowledge about language and identity and history. I think that that's a way to find and revel in the retentions that we talked about in terms of what was actually carried over across the water, whatever water it is that people are coming from, whether that's from Ireland or what, wherever. I just think it's really important that it not only be about the mind, but it's about the mind, or to recognize that the mind is another word for the brain, which is in the body, right? So it's about the mind, the body, the heart, and the spirit.
The unity. Yeah.
I'll just briefly share a couple of images from this piece. So you can see the black and white installation. And my friend is very good at taking pictures, so you don't actually see the French people around. But this is an open. I didn't ask the permission of Centre Pompidou to do this, to be in there, and people were kind of looking at me and not quite sure, what's happening. And that has actually become a hallmark of my work. That most of it is not presented in a proscenium stage, right? It's often on the street, in front of other people. And that's by design, because some of the people I want to see my work are not coming to the proscenium space. And they're certainly not necessarily paying $30 to $85 for a ticket to see something. And I think it's also related to, as Gabrielle's saying, that the mind and the body are connected, that I don't want my creativity to only be over here in this box that I can only access in certain moments, right? And it's not that I'm on all the time, but it's more so that I want more options. I want to be able to be on a stage if I choose to do that, but I also want to be able to be on the street. If we're going to use Zoom, then I'm going to try to find some interesting ways to interact with the camera and be performative in that way as well.
Now,
Yes, holistically. Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure about our time. I mean, our program was, we had some interruptions, but our program is supposed to last until 6:30. I don't want to impose on the two of you to
We thought we were going until 7. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Yeah, we got different times. I want to hear it from Danielle.
Okay. And we have to put Danielle into the program. So Dr. Cassidy, did you want
I'm here.
Did you want to introduce Danielle and have her come into the conversation as a new young author with these more seasoned?
Absolutely. Danielle, are you there?
I saw her.
I should say that here on campus, the internet has gone in and out several times, which is why you might be seeing 2 images of me.
I can see Danielle Berry.
Yeah, I don't know if she's unmuted. Danielle, can you hear us? Put it in the chat.
I've asked.
While we're waiting for Danielle to come on, I apologize because we didn't realize we were going over. I know there were a couple of people who said they were interested in the prompt, so I'll just share that quickly.
Mm-hmm.
If you have if you're feeling like you're in writer's block, or if you have a poem that it's not quite working out the way that you want, what the prompt is to take a poem that you've already written, and it could be good or bad, to your judgment, and write the shadow of that poem. And then, that can just be a series of things. And in the back of Rock South Stone, I have several suggestions, which are write the shadow of that poem, write the poem drinking lemonade, write the poem in the shape of a form. And so you're taking language that you've already generated and you're riffing on that language. That's what the prompt is.
Well, the activity that Gabrielle, Dr. Civil took us through, where she created a poem, or we created a poem collaboratively. That was a beautiful activity. I had never done that exercise before, and I'd be very willing to do it again, but it created a kind of collective or subconscious response that was, again, this touching the spirit and engaging with what we consider the irrational, which by embodying the work in some ways because I'm thinking of dance, I'm thinking of possession, because in so many traditions of the diaspora, there is this overtaking of the body by a spirit, by being engaged by a spiritual being that's external or considered to be external, that comes from the earth, that comes from the group and becomes a part of who we are. And I see some of that in how your poems, both of you collectively, your poems work, and the collaborations you do are a beautiful thing. I hope we can, I think we'll probably plot after this to try to find a way to get you all into South Carolina. But Danielle, have we found her?
I don't think we have, but I don't know if anybody else. Verlene, do you have any
questions? Yeah.
Yeah, or Janice or Carrie?
Jump in, folk.
Because we will take over this conversation and you're going to start talking Caribbean and y'all won't know what the hell we're doing.
Doug McClushy does that all the time, so.
That was actually the fascinating part for me is it feels such a privilege just to listen to you talk about worlds that I've only glimpsed illusions and mirrors of. So I thank you for that conversation. Carrie had something to say.
Carrie.
Oh, I'm just saying that I'm actually recovering from COVID. I canceled classes all week and I may not be able to have the energy to hang out much longer, but I had to come to Words Across the Water because it's always so great. And I loved your poems and performance art. Thank you. And all the wonderful ideas we share.
It's Dr. Carrie Perkins. She teaches on our campus at South Carolina State. And we also have Omotunde in our audience. Omotunde, are you able to unmute?
Hi.
Hi.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Loud and clear.
I'm so happy I was able to join. I got the email from Dr. Cassidy and I was just so excited. I was like, oh, wow, Words Across the Waters. And just listening to you both has really been a very enriching experience. And the ideas that you touched on are some of the ideas that I've also been very interested in as well. So I was born and raised in Lagos, Nigeria. And I've been here mostly in South Carolina, between South Carolina, and I've spent a lot of summers in Georgia. And I think, the inverse of it too is true that and Dr. Cassidy knows this and Dr. Martin as well, that I've also been very interested in diaspora. For me, it seems that, yes, the root seems to be from Africa, but there's something new that was discovered here or created here in diaspora, and I find that so fascinating. And it's something that's recognizable but different in its own way and unique. And I think, and in some of my poems and in a lot of my thinking, I'm trying to grapple with that familiarity and that kinship, that thing that I recognize as being mine, but transformed and different and its own thing, and something that I also want to be a part of, and I also want to learn and to experience. And so yeah, that's very, very interesting. So I think with poets who are born and grew up in diaspora and reaching back to Africa, I think in the same way I've been reaching here, not just in America and the South, but also Caribbeans and to see, and a very good example of this is Yoruba, my native language, and how that it's spoken in Cuba and in Brazil. And I always find that so fascinating that they were able to retain that. And it's different, it's not the same, but it is like, it's still recognizable, but it's transformed. And candomblé and santeria, those things they're not the same as it's practiced, but the roots are there and it's transformed into its own thing. And that thing that is different is valuable in itself, not just as a linkage, but as its own form of expression that has its own origins, its own roots. And I find that very, very interesting. So those are just my thoughts. And listening to your work has really been enriching, and I'm really glad that I got to be able to hear those words and see those images. So thank you.
Thank you so much. As a beautiful comment. And I think, yes, basically to what you've said, I think one of the things that's really important, we have talked a lot, and both Gabrielle and I use the language of back, but it is also about lateral reaching, right? And recognizing each other in the present tense, right? And so as much as I might be interested in kind of going back, I'm also interested in, a Yinka Shonabare, right? Or all of these other folks who are creating right now, right? And who we can interact with them and they can interact with us. And it's not a unidirectional experience or inspiration drawing. So yes, people dropping into the chat, other folks as well. Absolutely.
Gabrielle's dropping it. All these visual artists, Yinka Shonabare, Christoph Fili, Kehinde Wale, these are visual artists who also, in some ways, are echoing some of what you're doing with this reaching into those difficult to discuss places. And think of Christoph Fili and the controversy he created at the Brooklyn Museum, the representation of the Black Madonna. They almost cut who was it? Giuliani went to cut off the funding because of, this sort of very narrow view of spirituality and the transformation of spirituality that the extensions into diaspora may have motivated around different belief systems. So that's another fascinating conversation. We really do need to have you all try to come down and do a performance where we can see you embodying your work. So that'll be the next job we have to do, and get you with Dr. McCletchy has a very good friend who is a brilliant photographer from Trinidad, Maria Nunez, and it would be great to have all of you in something. So we'll get on that.
And Frank, it strikes me that maybe the next iteration, we don't need to talk about just words across the water. We need to talk about creativities across the waters, creations, because that's what we're talking about.
So yeah, this transmission of ideas and identity. Well, that was the other thing. So
I think too, let's because again, we're seeing this in the performance and the experience tonight, right? And unfortunately, ladies, I don't know if Tom had sent you the link where we had David Rudder for our last session last time, right? But this idea, again, going back to deconstructing and reimagining what knowledge looks like, right? So yes, we call it words across the water because it's catchy and all that kind of stuff, but we know that for non-Western cultures, and even Western ones, if they would admit it, right? Words are, again, just symbols of these other things, right? And so, whether it is dance or whether it is like what Peter Minshall does with his carnival designs that draws on various diasporas to create these fantastic costumes that you can't put on a costume and play and stand still, right? You have to dance it. You have to play with it. It has to move, right? And that is when you know, and when you are when you're in a steel band, you know, the flag woman who represents, you know, oh, I always forget which god, right? Who is cutting the space to allow that music to take hold, right? And to move through those people who are poor very often and working class and have nothing, right? But the joy, and that's where Maria captures sometimes these images of the joy that's on their faces, you know, and we all know that because we all have those kind of experiences that, you know, again, that idea of spirituality, right? In this kind of very uptight and whatever, I don't know, Jesus, you know, foolishness.
Liturgical as opposed to the sort of celebratory approach you're talking about.
Even but that's my point, even in a liturgical setting, right? The idea is that you're supposed to allow yourself to enter that space, right? And when you walk out of that so-called sacred space, you're supposed to take it with you, right? Which we don't do really good. And so this is my thing. This is what I guess I don't have the words to express it, but I'm just grateful for this evening. I'm sorry, I'm grateful.
It was a brilliant, the performances were absolutely transcendent. It's fantastic.
Thank you so much for inviting us into this series, and hopefully it will be the start of an incredible continued conversation, collaboration, opportunity to connect.
Absolutely, it's been a pleasure.
It's been terrific meeting you both. Is Danielle there, Tom? I'm not able to.
I've texted her. She hasn't left, but I think she may have, either she's having troubles. You know, the internet's been out on campus several times,
Yeah.
or she's walked away from her phone.
Yeah, unfortunately, our campus is in part as a result of some of the exigencies of COVID. We've been experiencing some technical difficulties on campus as we reconfigure some things. And one of the things that went out was Wi-Fi and the internet. So yeah, and if we're technology dependent, I'm at home. That's why my connection's relatively good. But if a student is on campus and in campus housing, she might have some challenges. So if there are other questions, we may end up ending at 7, because I don't know if she's unable to come in, and I can't find her in responding in the chat. So I'm guessing she probably has some sort of serious technical challenge.
I mean, I have a question that after this conversation, it just seems so naive, but it's been gnawing at me. So much of your work is focused on claiming, celebrating, inhabiting, inviting the past. And you know, as somebody who teaches the history of American literature, so much of the past is really quite grim. How do you invite the future? I mean, it struck me that Gabrielle, that your exercise about what do you want to bring back could just as effectively, and I might try this sometime, ask somebody to say, what do you want for the future? Or what do you want, even better, your grandfather to know about your future?
What do you want to create?
Yeah, what do you want to create? What do you want to create for your ancestor?
Or for your progeny, for your descendants?
Or for your progeny.
Yeah. Great question.
Well, I definitely think that I'm going to say our work. At first I was going to say our, and then I thought I shouldn't speak for Rosamond's work, but I'm like, you know what? I'm going to. I think our work very much about the future in the sense, in many senses, but especially in the sense that it believes that we have a future. It believes that we are going to be there in the future. It's about trying to hold, the reason why we're holding memory is because we're holding certain kind of memory to take it into the future. And we want to be precise and specific about what we're taking and how we're talking about what happened, as well as inventing towards. And so one project that Rosamond and I also collaborated on that we haven't talked about today, both of us have done a lot of different things, it's big, but we, along with 5 other Black women performers with different relationships to the words Black women in performance, collaborated on a call for experiments in joy. And that call was composed first of kind of a preamble or sort of an establishment of who we were, where we were coming from, what our process was in terms of thinking about what we wanted to invite or ask for people to do in the world. And then we created a score. And this, to me, even the form of a score, you know, coming out of that, of a musical tradition, but moving it into performance where you're really inviting certain kinds of gestures, it's writing out something for people to do in the future. Something for people to do now, but it's a form that's also moving out into the future. So that for me was a really important example of kind of like Black feminist future making through us coming together and saying, you know, inviting people, you know, welcoming people into, calling people, because the project was call and response, calling people into a call for experiments in joy. And so the steps for an experiment in joy: step 1, tell the truth. Step 2, make something new. No, excuse me, step 2, invite some, I can't believe it. Step 1, tell the truth. Step 2, make something new. Step 3, invite someone in. Step 4, document. Step 5, repeat. So especially that 5th step, that's the future.
And I think that the sense of repetition might not always be read as being for the future. And as I talk, I'm just going to show, some images from the piece that I did for call and response, which has been taken up by some people as an Afrofuturist piece. But also to call attention to what Doreen is saying in the chat, right? Which is, we kind of very broadly speaking, so broadly that we might criticize our students if they speak this broadly, but broadly speaking, right, Black people are people who we sometimes feed our ancestors before we eat. So that's past, present, and future all at the same time, right? We name our children sometimes after people who have passed away, right? We are in space acknowledging the past that is informing our present as we are making the future. So I think, so I'm agreeing with everything that Gabrielle is saying and just adding to it to say that the future is always there, I think, in the work.
With the past.
With
Which
the
is what Marine,
past.
yeah, that's what Marine was saying. The separations, because of spirituality, the separations may be false in a sense. Yeah.
But
And
I
so-
want to say this, right? So when we talk about repeat and you're talking about it in this kind of artistic space, what do we do in this as scientists, right? What is the research method? Okay, when we get to the end, we're supposed to replicate. And we are building on the work of us or of others, right? Just spent 2 hours yesterday doing this with my students, right? This is what we do over and over and over. We look to the work of others, we create our question, we do our little whatever, and then we repeat over and over. Different spaces, but the same activity.
Well, I'm just going to say to Dr. Rosamond King and to Dr. Gabrielle Civil, thank you. Thank you for your embodiment of an Afro-feminist intellectual deconstructive engagement with this extraordinary use of language. And it's this kind of thing that we really do need to expose our students to even more. There's a whole series of other questions I would have had about, you know, why feminist instead of womanist, you know, a whole bunch of stuff that might be very interesting later. Yes, it's future conversations, but thank you so much for being present. I did have a concluding just PowerPoint. I don't know if it will, since nobody's going to interrupt it, I'll see if I can share my screen one more time and do the last little bit. So this was the end. So that was, and of course, Dr. McCletchie is our professor of sociology and in the Department of Social Sciences. She's also trained in anthropology. And this is our little team. And of course, we would not be able to have the conversation if we had not been funded by the South County Humanities. So thanks to them once more for their support of this kind of extraordinary conversation about the various parts of diaspora and Museum and Planetarium and South Carolina State. So thank you all so much. And that concludes my official participation. So everybody's gone. Let me see what else is in the chat, what exciting things are there.
I'm going to go ahead and end the recording.
Okay.
Okay, I just need to write these down. Publishers.
We can do, for as long as you feel like it, informal chat.